Yeah, I was connected too, and then I disconnected.
Well, we lost one.
Oh,
but we got two. Okay. Here we go.
Here comes Mickle.
Well, lost one. Oh, but we got two. Okay.
Here I am.
Here we go.
Okay.
Hi, Mickle.
Hi.
Here we are.
Where's Jason?
He's sick.
No, he just wrote me a really long email this morning.
Yeah, he's got some kind of tummy bug, and I saw him yesterday on Zoom, and he looked pretty awful. So I just think he took some anti-nausea meds, and he's out for the day. So,
Oh.
And this is what we're telling everyone live. Hey.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, what's up, Mickle? Good to see you again, man. No
Hey there,
doubt.
Mickle.
Yeah, hey, everybody. So nice to see faces, even on Zoom.
Dana, are we live?
Shayna's muted.
Sure is. I guess maybe we are. Anybody?
We're live. Sorry, I'm messing with things.
Oh, okay. Well, let's start. Okay, thank you, and thank you to everybody joining us. Yeah, this is an interesting setup where we are on sort of a private Zoom meeting, and then we are also simulcasting. Well, that's a very 1970s sounding word, but simulcasting to the YouTube site. So yet another talkback for one of these recorded plays for the Catastrophic Theater. We're joined by Mickle Maher, playwright, and the full cast of Song About Himself. And I hope people had a chance to watch the video version. And I hope that some of the folks listening in today would also have seen the live version of the play, which now seems, I think we noted this with the last reading, or not reading, but last one of these, that it seems like forever ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like such a long time ago, but it really wasn't all that long. So the way this will work, as usual, is I'll ask a couple of prompt questions to get the conversation with the group going. And then Shada will send us any questions or comments that come up in the chat. And I'll pass those along as well, and we'll go that way. So first of all, Mickle, I usually put you on the spot first as the playwright, with a version of the unanswerable question of sort of like, where did this come from? Knowing that it's kind of tough to recall a lot of the time where inspiration comes from, but what were you reading? What were you thinking about when this play started percolating?
Sure. So this came out of the Goodman Theater up here in Chicago. Every year has what's called a playwrights unit, where there's 4 playwrights are brought in and given some funding and some deadlines to create their own work. And you propose a play, a project, and the project that I proposed was actually a play about Ornette Coleman. So I was reading a lot of Ornette Coleman, listening to a lot of Ornette Coleman, and watching a lot of Ornette Coleman documentaries and videos. So free jazz was on my mind, and that sort of the busting open of jazz that he did in the early 60s. That led to thinking about Walt Whitman and what he did with essentially free verse in the 19th century. And then somehow, I don't remember how it drifted over into the internet, and a play somehow that had to do with the sort of the freewheeling internet and the relation of the internet to free jazz, I suppose, or to social media sites and free jazz, right? So you're not, when you're on Facebook or you're on Twitter or things similar to that, and you're scanning through, it doesn't even have the same sort of shape or structure as a newspaper would, or just a magazine or anything. It's really just a kind of random assemblage based off of very loose motifs, right? Of whatever the news of the day is, or the meme that's being passed around, or whatever. So it has a sort of similar feel to me, or structure, or shape, if you will, or non-shape. And so I think that's around then I'm starting to build something around the idea of the internet and the future sort of dystopian ideas of that, and how it relates to free jazz. And my main character, Ellen, started to come up, and this whole idea of a future society where the internet had actually collapsed, and we didn't even have that sort of shapeless structure to guide our daily narratives anymore. And then it sort of took off from there. So the whole idea of that what would happen if the internet actually, if the hackers actually won, if the people that we're trying to disrupt the internet in various ways, which is an ongoing war, if they won, and the internet decayed, and what would that do to us, and what would happen then if it tried to reboot itself. And so that's as best I can remember. But among all my other plays, this one really, it's hard for me to reverse and follow the breadcrumbs back,
right,
for us to figure out where it actually came from. That's as best I can do.
One thing that I recall in first receiving the script from Jason sent it to me as an email, and this was a while, I think, before the production got underway. So I had sort of a while to think about it. It's a very unusual looking script on the page. The way it's laid out, it doesn't really look like a conventional script. The pages are fairly sparse. There's not, per page, there's not a lot of ink on each page. And I wonder if I can turn this over to the cast. I wonder if you recall first impressions of the script, because it is, it's an unusual looking document.
I got to say that I fell in love with the script when I first saw it. I loved this play a lot. And it's weird too, Mickle. I mean, I'm glad that you weren't there at the time that we were rehearsing it, because I always like to imagine, my own, I like to put my own reality on how did this come about? How did this come into being? And the note that struck for me the most, hearing you talk about jazz and the inspirations of it, I see that all the way through. The thing that really struck me was the idea that it felt like a society that had been leaning on one thing, and that thing collapses, and now they don't know how to walk anymore, and they're searching for something, and the idea that jazz or music or something original, that you have to stand on your own feet and create, and a broken society that had just been leaning so hard, everybody, until it fell down. And I thought that it was a beautiful story. And the fact that, it's funny you say breadcrumbs. I loved reading it because it was a page turner for me, because I wanted to know more about this world. I wanted to know more about this world that they live in, and the details of this world are so specific. The idea that the mailman with Noel, and the consequences of being a mailman, and one of the last people that are still kind of functional, because in my head, that they have the closest link to the old world that they were leaning on, the information exchange, the internet, and so the mailman still being there, that kind of detail in this sparse world, I just found riveting, and I loved it. And this is definitely, at least for me, one of the plays that I read the script and I was like, yeah, I got to be a part of that. I got to go get my part. And so I actually read that one a couple of times and rehearsed before I auditioned. And I was like, I really want to be a part of this. And I'm glad that I was. It was by far the most challenging script, for that reason, Rob, that on paper, it's kind of difficult to do. It's not conventional storytelling. The through lines, they're long through lines and not conversational the whole time. We're not looking at each other, and everything that you're saying is so similar to something else that you're saying. And it was the most challenging script I ever did. It was the first time I ever did a play where I couldn't sit backstage at half hour and go through my lines for the show. It was just too much. And so I had to go out and have faith that it was in there somewhere. And that was it was a very interesting challenge and a really good one. And of all the plays, I've got to say it was a very enjoyable ride. I really liked that. Even though it was so disconnected from the other actors on stage, it felt like we were in the same world in the box, and it was really cool. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Cool.
we when Jason shared it with me early on too, and I had a similar feeling, Javon, of like, I have to be Carol. But what was really cool, though Jason and I had these discussions early on, the play didn't necessarily dictate a type for any of the characters. You know, I remember the auditions being really interesting. Both of you guys just brought so much to, but it was just such an unexpected, the audition process itself was just so interesting. Yeah, when we read it, you saw just all the repetition. And so Jovan and I actually, when our kids would both be in school, we had Ken, who was the assistant director, running lines with us. We'd all meet at my house and we would just drill. Sorry, Noel. Noel was teaching. He couldn't come. But we did I will say though, you topped yourself on difficult memorization for me with small ball, because small ball is still the hardest thing I've ever done.
Really? I would have thought this is, yes. I mean, this is so, because Jovan mentioned this, like there's lines that are very, very similar to each other, but then there's these like one syllable or one tiny word is different. And if you know, but yeah. I had no idea, Tamria. That's
but that the process of memorizing something like that, I had never done that. And it's a cool feeling. It is one of the enjoyable things that I think a lot of people don't realize. You come to see a play, you see a show, you see a story, you know the actors rehearsed, you know that, you know, the process, everybody has a general idea of the process of doing a play. But being an actor and memorizing lines and having to commit something like that to memory with such subtle differences, it really calls on a different kind of mental connection between touch points. I like to imagine it's touch points in the dialogue that you have to hop from one to the next. And that process is a really interesting and rewarding one. And I think that this script really brought a lot of that out by just having, just like that, there's a single word that's different or a single little phrase in there that's different. And going from those points, you get to see something a little bit more beautiful about the poetry of the language in the play, you know, yeah. by making those little leapfrogs. And you kick yourself if you miss one, because, you know, you're taking something from the audience that they didn't even know that they are going to miss. You know, they wouldn't notice, but it fleshes it out in a really beautiful way. And it was a great script to work on and very hard, but it was great. Yeah.
At the audition, Jason for some reason he had me singing the lines instead of saying the scenes. And but man, it was great at the audition. I'd never done that, like acted singing and also having emotion coming out and everything. So it was great. And I agree with everything Javon said about the memorization and going back and watching it, you know, the other day is like, those lines are like coming back, like the timing of it and everything. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. There was a segment that
I want to back and forth. I'm back.
There was a segment that you and I had, Noel, that I will never forget. I think we were over at the alley upstairs rehearsing maybe one time somewhere, that we were just that scene where you come out and I couldn't get it to stick for the life of me. And I just have this memory of you and I bonding over doing this same scene over and over again, like 17 times, and victorious when we finally got it right. So yeah, it was good.
It was a tough rehearsal process for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing I love about the script is just so much comedy that's in it, so much humor too. I mean, there's so many moments that are heartbreaking, or it's just so intricate and the language, but then just every now, just little things like words, like when the mailman, when you're talking about giving packages to people and their neck stocks, like yes. It's just the little Mickle-isms, the little words, the Mickle magic that comes in.
But I should say, if we're I know you and Noel. I don't know Jovan's. I haven't seen him in anything else, but I know Noel and you, Tamria, I know you primarily as comic actors. And it was such a joy to see you both go into this, what is essentially a really serious script, and just didn't play to any of your comic strengths. Like you were like, yes, there's funny parts or whatever, but it was just such a great, that's what made this production in particular extremely strong for me, was watching two really great comic actors just I love that when that happens, like in Hollywood, like when people that are typically known for, like Adam Sandler, when he does a serious movie, I just think it's 10 times better. But not that you guys are Adam Sandler. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying.
What are you saying,
there's a
Mickle?
real pleasure. There's a real pleasure in seeing, especially in your community, you guys are known as extraordinarily funny actors, and I think that really, I could feel that feed into the pleasure of the evening when I came and saw it, was just seeing you guys just play it straight, and it was great for that reason.
We were totally nervous that night when you came, for sure.
Yeah, I was nervous too. No, I have to say, you guys have done a lot of my shows, and other people have done shows. This is one of my favorite, not only because it's just a great production, but also that I think it is really one of the most difficult plays of mine to pull off. And I was nervous because I hadn't seen it outside of my production up here. Capital T did it down in Austin. I hadn't seen that production. It seemed to go well, but I hadn't seen it. And I was nervous because I thought, I just don't see how they're gonna, because it is an odd script, and I wasn't sure if it was gonna work, and it totally worked. So it was a relief.
Talking about the Chicago production, since that came up, there is a question in the chat. Mickle, could you talk about the difference between, I'm just reading the question from the chat, the differences between the original ending in the Chicago production and the ending you wrote for Catastrophic?
Yeah, this is another difficult, because as soon as I rewrote it, I kind of repressed the memory of the first one. But I think the main thing is I was hinging, so when Carol discovers that she's an AI, that she's actually not a human being, in the Chicago production, the script was really trying to make that a big crisis moment, like that it's like Oedipus discovering that he slept with his mom and killed his dad, sort of like, oh my God, I got to go tear my eyes out. And my revelation after the Chicago production is that no, that's not true for her. This is actually what she's been trying to do. And in that moment, she remembers, oh yeah, I set this whole thing up. I made myself forget that I was an AI, and I created this whole world and this whole programming around this moment to come to this moment where I can advance my own consciousness and become, if not human, become more human, or go to the next level. And so that, I think there's a stage direction now that in the new version where it's like she's just, when she finds that out, when the moment of realization comes, I think it's like she just found a drop pearl or something that she had dropped, and then she's found it, and that's the level of like, oh, that's good. Oh, good, I found that, and that's good. But it's not this great cracking open. It's a cracking open for Todd and for hostess, but it's for Carol. It's just like, oh, that sort of letting go of that like need to have some huge investment in Carol's character and heartbreak in her in that moment was important for me to see that. So I think that's the main thing. So the tragedy is more held by hostess and Todd, and not Carol. She just goes off on her further into the weed.
I'm jumping around in the chat order a little bit. I will get to all of them, but I'm just trying to make some connections. So also from the chat, could you also talk about the differences with the Capital T production, the Austin production? Apparently it seemed more choreographed and almost dance-like.
I didn't see it.
Oh.
So I don't know if Mark or any of those guys are on this chat, so they could speak to that, because I think some of them might have seen your guys' production, but I don't think any of you saw theirs.
No, we ran very close the same time,
right?
And we actually, there was only like one day that we could have gone. It was like our tech, and I of course before we opened had no intention of going and watching another production like the day before we go into performances, because that seemed like it would get into my head to be seeing other people's choices with the material right before we were first to do it. Jovan wanted to go, but we
Real
told him
bad.
it's not a good idea.
I was
And
unhappy.
then, but I know Marianthi went to Austin and saw it, and I do remember her saying that it was more specifically and intricately staged. That there was a lot more action physically of their positioning and movements, and ours was a much more just on a grid, as you saw. You know, again, one of the things I love about this play is that there was no set, and there's certainly sound and lights design, but there was one prop, and it was the clarinet, and that's it. So I think, again, the words really, the meat of the play speaks for itself that way, that it carried it so strongly.
I gotta say, I feel bad. I mean, I'm glad for everybody who got to see it on YouTube, but they really missed out on being in that space, in that square, in the dark, and with that sound in the background, with the sound and the feeling of being in that room was really, you know, very much its own kind of character in the play. You know, being in that emptiness, creating that feeling of void was very significant. Yeah.
We also brought it in more for our production. It was a much more intimate arena setting. And we hadn't rehearsed with anyone seated in the front row. And so on opening night, the lights came up, and my butt was just going to brush up against like everybody right there. And it was already the challenge of not making any eye contact and focus with these wonderful other actors. But then it was like, oh my God, there's someone right there. So that was a little jarring at first, but then it became so intimate with them too. Ultimately, I'm so happy that we did choose to bring it in.
Yeah.
Going back earlier in the chat, this is more of a comment. It says it's an amazing production, but also just noting that whoever wrote this wishes there were more real science fiction works in theater. And I wonder if Mickle or anybody else has responses to just the general theme of science fiction on the stage. You know, a play like The Nether comes to mind, but you know, there aren't that many.
Yeah, I don't have too many profound thoughts on that. I think when it's pulled off, it's very satisfying, because but most science fiction does. I mean, does rely. I think science fiction is a there's a sort of a split genre. You have the science fiction that is a lot of fun with special effects and laser beams and aliens and so forth, and then you have science fiction of ideas, and that it seems to me that theater can do both of those things. The theater that leans towards special effects or crazy aliens or laser beams or what have you might be the kind of science fiction theater that is more, for lack of a better term, more goofy and fun, and ask the audience to enter in, to forget all the great movies that they've seen with great special effects, and to just enjoy the ride of a sci-fi high tech or low tech evening. Whereas plays like The Nether, I think are plays where you're trying to get the audience to enter into a mindscape, and it's difficult to do, because you have to set up a future world with it's just the exposition is just very, very difficult to do in science fiction and theater. Just to get people to buy in and to believe in an entirely familiar but entirely different world with entirely different rules. I mean, they have to understand those rules. I mean, if you get to page 10 or 12 and they don't understand those rules, or can't even make a good guess at them, you're really lost. And if those rules aren't interesting, then you probably don't have a good play. So it's very difficult. It's a difficult genre to bring to the stage. And yeah, so that I don't have too many profound thoughts on it. It's just that it's hard. It's a hard thing to do.
Well, one of the things that helped establish the rules in the world was the way that the characters speak, the specific nature of the dialogue. And I wonder, both the playwright and also the actors, if you have thoughts about some of the lingo that was established, lengthy posting and back and forth and all of that. I mean, that it certainly stands out in my memory as one of the more interesting things about the play is just the way they talk in this particular world.
How did you come up with that? I think that's a really good point. How do you keep continuity and decide on, is this something that this person would say? Is this a word that they would use? Or is it not? Is this a made up word that fits in this world? Or is this a made up word that I'm just trying to jam in because I think it's good? How do you come up with that, Mickle?
Yeah.
That seems very challenging.
It was. I think so. I had Whitman always to fall back on. So everything is coming in some respects. There's two rules. Everything Carol's saying is filtered through some distortion of Whitman, Walt Whitman's, especially Leaves of Grass. So A Song of Myself. And so you can borrow almost anything from that, slightly distort it and put it in her mouth and it'll make sense. And borrow his rhythmic sort of his parallelism, his use of repetition, his style of one line and then a kind of variation on that line. So he has a very interesting way of using repetition and variation within a couplet. So Whitman, distortion of Whitman, anything goes. Anything to do with computers or the internet, you have to change the word. So you can't use the word internet, you can't use the word computer, you can't use the word phone. So you have to think of other words for those that hopefully would make sense and then would also be recognizable after a few beats to the audience. So the leaf-sized tray, I thought, okay, that's totally clear. Everybody will know what that is. We had, with my company, we work with Outside Eyes. We bring in, before opening night, we bring in people who just are people that might have a lot of experience with us or with theater or no experience with us or theater or whatever. People from all walks of life, we have them come in and then we listen to their notes. And one of my questions was, when the characters say leaf-sized tray, what did you imagine? And the responses were incredible. Like they just, nobody got it. Nobody understood like that it was just a handheld phone. And so that was really, people were imagining banana leaves and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I was like, it's just the thing that you've got right in your hand, like every single day. So that was interesting, but they still got that it was a communication device of some sort, but they just didn't understand that. And after that couple of nights where we were asking that question, I didn't make any alterations to the script, but I wonder if all those people were just weirdos and anomalous, but this might be an open question to the people watching, is like, if you saw the play, did you get that? So, yeah. So that was the challenge.
As you go along, like different things like the forget-me-nots and you spake and things like that, as a reader or as an audience member, your mind like kind of automatically thinks, oh, that's probably what used to be this, or that used to be like this, and you automatically make that evolution. I just love that about the play, and I like how the forget-me-nots would just repeat stuff over and over and kind of flood the information, and it's kind of like what's happening now. So much information just gets flooded out, so that we start to believe everything, or they want us to believe everything. But I like that the way the language was evolutionary wise like that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to change the subject by bringing up another question from the chat.
That's fine.
Okay, so there are two in the chat related to music, and I'll pose them in the order that they came in. The first one is, are there specific pieces of, sorry, no, I was going to ask the other one because it came in first. Where is it? Sorry, this is filled up faster than I thought. I'll just ask them in reverse order, sorry. So are there specific pieces of music in the stage directions, or is that a decision left to each director?
Each director, yeah. So, yeah, I worked with, here in Chicago, we worked with my friend Mark Messing, who's a composer, and he just came up with these nice interstitial bits of music. And Jason, I don't know who he worked with, but it was great. I mean, it was similar sort of stuff.
It was Chris Bakos.
Oh, right.
And yeah, he had come up with some great things. One of the things that was just so effective, he had a giant subwoofer center stage up from the grid that created this really driving, but very low. You didn't, and it was on when the audience came in, so they didn't necessarily realize as they were talking that it was happening. I remember when he was testing the levels of it, he said, Tamara, come stand in the middle here, but I really don't think you're going to be able to handle this. It's going to be too intense. I'm like, what? And then it felt like the inside of my body was going to burst into pieces. It was this just, and I was like, I can't do the play like this. So he did lower it a bit, but it was so effective because it was constant until that final moment when Carol and hostess actually for the first time turn and see each other and make eye contact, and then it dropped out. And I talked to audience members after where it was that thing of like, something just happened, this changed that really punctuated that moment in such a lovely way. Yeah. So thank you, Chris Bakos.
Yes.
So the other music-related chat question is that, Mickle, you talked about jazz earlier being on your mind during the writing of the play. How did the cast feel about music while building this production? So were you, what was your reaction to music in the play, but maybe also beyond that, were you thinking about music outside of the play? Were you listening to anything in particular at the time?
I didn't really notice the music. All I knew is that I really noticed that bowel shaker sound until he got that level dialed in right. And so the music was very, no, I don't think that
like
that was
jazz in general, like finding out that it was Arnett Coleman. I think we really, any subtextual work that we sort of fell into was more looking into the Whitman, as opposed to having long sessions with wine and jazz. Although now I think we should have done that. But I will sometimes say what Carol says, jazz is not a good idea. Uh-oh, you're muted.
I started talking and left my mic off. Sorry. Here's a staging related question. Is this the only catastrophic show performed at Match that was staged in the round? Can anybody think of a one that?
Hey.
No, actually, so was First Suburb by Hannah Porter.
First Suburb, yeah.
I
wonder if there are any other, thoughts about, and also that, I mean, brings up the question, Tamara, you talked a little bit about just being so close to the audience, but I wonder if there are other thoughts that the cast have about just performing in the physical space.
I mean, I had a thought because like I hadn't acted in the round since like college, so I kept having this thought of like, oh, I've got to make sure I'm facing the people behind me and everything. But like watching the video, it's like, man, it looks good with the people behind me. I should have just relaxed.
Isn't that crazy? When you see the video of yourself, you realize, oh, all that stuff I was stressing about, I really didn't need to stress about that. I could have just chilled and been in the moment. Like, and
even in the video, it's fine when you see someone's back, like you still get it. But yeah, it's definitely a different acting style of like playing out and there's people all around you. I like the intimate feel though, for sure.
There was definitely a lot of, we did have moments, even though Jason is not, as a director, I would say he's not known for very strict blocking. He doesn't come in there. He wants just all the thoughts and feelings to happen, and then we'll make the pictures. But we did have to spend time in some of the longer speeches, like in Carol's very long speech, of figuring out how to turn without it just being this like, I'm going to rotate in circles this whole time. But again, coming from my own choreography background, the diagonals, man, that's where the strength was at. So
yeah.
And then being able to have the distance so that if you were both on the same diagonal, but be able to look through each other too, to not have to make the eye contact. So
kept talking about seeing beyond.
Should have been in the round. That's the other play that should have been in the round.
Which one?
Evening at the Talk House should have been in the round.
Yeah, that could have been really good in the round.
It could have. And the platform we could have done without that way.
Yeah.
That squeaky platform for Evening at the Talk House. Here's another sort of acting related question from the chat. So much modern acting is about seeing your scene partner and connecting to them. how did you approach a world where the characters can only connect in limited ways?
Well, I was kind of saying this a minute ago that a lot of it was trying to see beyond everything that was in the room and just trying to focus beyond the audience, beyond just space. And so it was almost like acting to the void of just, just acting to darkness and just trying to find what you're looking for out there in this. I mean, it was hard. Sometimes you'd catch yourself looking at the other actor, but we got out of that habit pretty quick.
Yeah, it's doing a scene with the lights out in the dark. You're looking, but not looking at anything. And so I think I felt like that. Like I was a concierge for a long time. And I worked behind the desk. And when you're helping people, you're helping them. And I was trying to help Carol and you helped me, but you don't really see them. I mean, they're right in front of you.
Only the big tippers.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
It was hard, but I think because we could still rely so much on our voices, I mean, it was, you could feel you could feel someone's voice in the room, which is maybe something that's harder to do in this new world that we're in. Mm-hmm. And when we talked to you first, Mickle, about streaming one of your wonderful plays that we've done, you had mentioned we should probably do Song About Himself because it seems actually pretty timely now. And I've had other people say that too. You guys should really remember Song About Himself, just with everyone now going so deep into the weed.
Well, I mean, we could talk a bit more about how the play has either gained relevance or simply changed its relevance. But now that we are maybe even more internet dependent because of isolation and all that, the play and looking at the video took on a resonance for me about how even more drastic the loss of the internet would be if it happened today. Well, we're all socially isolating and all that. And so I don't know if people have further thoughts about that, but the play makes me think that we are I don't think ever going to be able to go backwards from an internet dependency without something truly drastic happening.
The background.
All signs really point to us spending more time like this.
Well, I don't know. I see the appeal. I mean, I had to close my World Star to take this Zoom meeting, so I feel you. But I can definitely see the backlash. For you know what? I tell you what, with this socially isolating thing, I tried to buy a bike, and I had no idea that there's a national bike shortage right now.
Whoa!
There is a national. You can't buy a bike. I mean, I'm sure you can get a trashy bike, but I'm not trying to get a trashy bike. I'm trying to get a good bike. And there's a national bike shortage in New York because there's so many people at home and they want to exercise, they want to get out, they want to do. And so everybody's getting on their bikes. And Yellowstone, I love watching clips of people act the fool at Yellowstone playing with the bison. And now there are people going to national parks that had never been there because they want to get out. I feel like the pendulum swings both ways, and I think with us being so connected and seeing everything through our phone all the time, we know that that's not really the real world, and that there is a longing for jazz, and I think that everybody has that. I think that call will be answered, and even in this time where we're forced to kind of stay apart, people, I don't see that sticking so much. I don't know. I love my internet. I'll click all day, but I still want my bike. I can't get it.
A propane shortage up here for everybody doing grilling.
Yeah. It makes you, when it's too much of a good thing. Like my kids, my son was so mad at me because I got some Nothing Bunt, the bunt cake place that makes those great bunt cakes. I love those. And I got a big one. And so we were eating bunt cake like every other day for a solid week. And he was loving it. But eventually he's like, Dad, I don't want any more. And I thought that I would like it and I would want to eat it all the time, but No. And I thought it was such a beautiful thing. It was like, you know, like a crackhead OD'd and was like, I need to go to rehab. He was like, I don't want any more cake. Yeah. And so I feel the call of nature now that we're all stuck at home. I don't just want to go to the bars. I want to go to the park. I want to go, you know.
I'm in my house all day. I don't know how to ride a bike. I'm afraid I'm going to turn into like the Wall-E people or something. I'm just like going to stop moving at all. And just like, this is my whole life now. And then it's just be like, so, okay. Note to self, get out in nature, get some propane. All right.
To bring us back to the play a bit, but still carrying on the theme, also from the chat, there are a lot of components of Leaves of Grass that could speak to today's issues as well. That's not surprising. And Mickle, are you interested in more Whitman, working more with Whitman on maybe a future project?
Probably not. I mean, theory. I mean, I love. I love Walt Whitman, but usually when I'm done with one, except for Shakespeare, I suppose I've gone back to him. But when I've sort of used one author in a play, I usually just go on and go to the next one. So I'm not sure. I mean, he's hard. That's the thing. It's because he's not so much of a storyteller as the other people that I usually use. So. For me, it felt like I'd figured I'd cracked the nut of talking about him in a play in a way that I wanted to, and I don't know that I could do that again. So that's the the inadequate answer to that question. But I to be honest, I don't. It's not on the horizon.
So I don't want to ask the usual interviewer question. That would be like, well, who are you reading now, with an eye towards maybe, you know, but okay, but and maybe I will, but let me ask this question though. Are there authors that you're very interested in, but you know you'll never, probably never involve them in a play? Is there, like, you really love Chaucer, but there's never going to be a Mickle Maher Chaucer inflected play?
No, there's nobody that's not on the, I mean, so it's, because it's always a surprise to me when it ends up. I never start off with, this is going to be about Walt Whitman, or this is going to involve William Blake, or this is whatever. So it's always, I always arrive at that author somewhere like a third of the way into the process. And so it's always a surprise to me, and it's never, so it's never planned out. So I could never strike anybody off that list.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, since you seem to be open to it, is there somebody, another author that's under consideration at the time, or that you're reading with an eye toward something?
Yeah, so I think I'm trying to do something around Pinocchio, but just me now saying that will probably mean that that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But Pinocchio has been the one. That's who I've been tooling around with. So Pinocchio, but also some American folk songs. Stackley and John Henry, and there's an old English folk song, Jackaroo. If Jason was here, he would know those because Dylan did covers of two of those. So those characters from that and Pinocchio are sort of in a gang right now. They're running around and doing stuff. So that's my interest right now. Yeah, so not as highbrow as usual, but
no, but very, very cool to think of those characters even being sort of in tangential thoughts. Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
Can't wait to see what comes out of it.
Yeah. There's not a lot more in the chat. I think I've covered most of them, either directly or indirectly. So if people have further questions, it is 6:46 now. So we don't want to go too much past the hour. So now's a good time to, if you've not done so, to ask your questions in the chat, and Shannon will pass them along to us. But let's just talk a little bit about fond memories, either from the rehearsal process or the run of the show. Are there things that you've, still got, sort of warm memories of from doing this production?
Well, we trying to find a place to rehearse was a big part. Like, it's such a quiet play, and the match is kind of a noisy place on a Saturday afternoon with kids shows going on. Mm-hmm. So that just being able to do this at several different locations during the rehearsal process, that's one of the things I think of, like so many different places we went to rehearsing.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
language has stayed with us too. I mean, we make comments with people about lengthy posting and back and forthing. And that's going to stick with us all. I think once you've been in that world for so long, there is a pause. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like people I know, my father or something, there is a pause, you know. So, just that stuff stuck. There was something bad though, which was that we were deep in rehearsals when the election, the 2016 election happened. And I guess I'm giving away probably most of the voting preferences of
Who
people
won?
involved in the show. But we were not anticipating that. And I do remember that day of coming back to rehearsal after the 2016 presidential election. And just, I mean, in some ways, I'm so thankful that we did have this and that we were so close to opening, because we had to just shift our heads out of that and get back into this world. But
Yeah.
that was a tough rehearsal.
When I came down to see your guys' production, obviously I wrote this play long before Trump was even a serious contender. And I remember doing talkbacks after the show. I didn't know if it was gratifying or not. I couldn't ever figure out my feelings about it, but that everybody just wanted to talk about how this play was such a great commentary on Trump somehow. And I was like, I have no idea where you're getting, I'm exaggerating, but there was definitely it was a few people in every audience talkback. And the talkbacks in general were really great, because Houston especially, they have a great music scene and free jazz scene, which I didn't know. And so there was a lot of jazz heads in the audience ready to talk about Coleman and other things, and Whitman and so forth. But it seemed, maybe it was just my imagination, maybe you guys remember this, but it seemed there's, in those talkbacks, they just wanted to bring it, like people just wanted to talk about that topic. And I felt bad that it was like we weren't actually doing a play about that, but somehow people were projecting that on it somehow.
I remember you having to clarify that for one particularly insistent man, and you were like, I wrote this 2 years before.
Mickle, can I ask you? I know for us rehearsing it, working on it, we all had our adventure with it, personally with the script, and then together memorizing and running lines. For you, writing this script, I'm just curious, how much of it is a solitary endeavor? How much of it, do you spend time getting tickled at yourself at coming up with something especially creative that you've been wrestling with that comes to fruition? Like, what is your adventure memory of this play? Because it was an adventure for us. Do you have that same kind of recollection having written it?
This play was hard. I usually have that, what did you say? You tickle yourself, or you feel, you have a moment where you're like, oh, that's really funny. That's brilliant. Or I really, throughout this whole thing, I was like, this is hard. And I was more in doubt of myself during this play than most others, for whatever reason. I think it was mostly because I was trying to invent this new language, and I wasn't. And I thought, I'm just faking this. This is just a big fake-aroo, and not really based on anything. I'm just sort of going up, making it up as I go along. And so that feeling of I'm not really on solid ground was, you always have that creating anything because you're not on solid ground. But with this in particular, I didn't feel on solid ground all the way through. And it's really the only play I actually gone back to and rewritten after the initial production, with Jason's help and Mark McKell's down in Capital T. We went down there and worked on the script, and that was a great process. But that's the first time that's ever happened.
Wow.
So yeah, it was just hard for me to see it. I couldn't figure it out. So
how did you then resist the urge to? Because like Rob was saying at the beginning, the script is very, on paper, it leaves a lot up in the air for us to come up with, what it looks like, what it sounds like, the language is there, but there's not a lot of you telling the actors and the production, there's not a lot of you telling them what to do with it. How were you able to let it go with feelings of?
Because I didn't know what to tell you, except that it has to be in the round, and there's no props. I mean, besides the clarinet, and I mean, there's a couple stage directions, like you can't use robot voice when you're doing there is a pause, and you can't have crazy costumes. They should just be costumes that the audience doesn't even see really, and that was it. So it was so that apparently was enough, because you guys did it exactly the way I think it should be done. So I feel like the whole, like, you can't look at each other, you can't speak in robot voice, but there's something about that you're performing text is the job of every actor in every single play. Like you can look at your scene partner all you want, but are you really okay, I'm really on shaky ground. What I'm trying to say is that you're never really when you look at your scene partner, what are you looking at? Are you looking at the character? Are you looking at Tamri? What are you seeing when you actually make eye contact, just except for another pair of eyes? And so that whole thing is always in question, whether you're allowed to look at them or not, whether you're allowed to use your real voice, your voice, and pretend that you're speaking real words that are coming out of you, or are you speaking text? You're always speaking text unless you're improvising, right? So those are the essential problems of every play that's written. Every play that's written, you're working from a text and you are pretending to make that text live. This is a play that says you are working from a text and you're trying to make some sort of approximation of text living, right? Because we're not supposed to be hearing them. We're supposed to be understanding that they're typing into or speaking into a phone, and that we're hearing that we're seeing that phone's text, right? So all those things sort of put the actors into what I would argue is the same box that they're always in. It's just slightly dimensioned out a little bit, and that's what I think. Besides you guys being very talented, once I saw your production, I realized, oh, they're just doing what they always do. They're just good actors confronted with the same problems. And if you think of this play as having different problems than other plays, I would say it really doesn't. It's memorizing the text, and it's trying to make text live, and it's trying to make a connection with your fellow actors and trying to tell the audience a story. It's doing all the same things, and it's confronted with the same problems that every play has when trying to do those things.
Yeah.
They're just notched up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure making that attempt. Absolutely. It was a pleasure. One of my favorites. I don't know. I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed that challenge and that script and that language and doing that. One of my favorite plays. Yeah. Definitely. I don't say that about most of them. Mostly, Tamri will tell you, I hate most plays.
Yeah, Javon's known as being pretty frank in his assessment of what he does and doesn't like.
Wrong in his opinion.
Oh yeah, yeah. If there's a script that's bad or the playwright made a mistake, I'll point it out. Like this, he messed up. This play, I loved it.
Yeah, thank you.
It was great to work on. It's a good script. It was great.
As we're winding down for our hour, Noel, there's a question specifically for you. I'm going to read it out. And again, this is from 3.5 years ago, so we'll see what you recall. But what was going on in your character's head between the last carol and the final line sing? Do you remember that?
Yeah, definitely. I felt that through this whole process that this character had found his voice, because he's not only struggling against society, he's struggling against his own personal, fears of people. So he's unable to communicate. So I feel like at that point, he almost before the end realized, like, I can speak now, and now I'm going to go out and try to be a human. That's kind of how I just I added some hope at the end for me. I felt that this character ends with hope.
That's a good way of, yeah.
Okay, solid answer. Yeah. There is in the chat, Mickle, somebody in the chat wants to say "Go Astros" to you.
Okay. This is.
I don't know.
Okay.
And there's one about conversations. Are you seeing this one about? I guess I kind of asked about this already, but do you have any further recollections about what inspired the writing of the play?
Gosh, no, I don't. I mean, I feel I have, internet addiction like everybody else. So that was the driving impulse. It was like trying to wrap my head around that, spending too much time online. So that's not really coming from a place of joy, which is maybe one of the reasons why the play was so difficult to write. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I love Walt Whitman, so that was very helpful when I realized it was about him and about his writing, and I could use that. So, but yeah, it's a real tangle. It's a real the whole there never is a single inspiration for any of my plays. There's never a single moment of something. So it's always an accumulation. It's always a layering of some different things and trying to patch things together in an interesting way.
Yeah, I've interviewed so many playwrights over the years, and that eureka moment that people imagine doesn't seem to exist very often.
If it does, it's usually a nice tale, right? It sounds great in talkbacks or in interviews that you have this eureka moment, and you want to sort of believe it. And there's definitely eureka moments in a lot of in the creative process, and you remember those. But for the whole, like a eureka moment where you just have this thing and you write a play in 3 days, I think that happens. It's never happened to me. I've had eureka moments where I'll sit down and write the opening monologue to something or the first few pages and be like, oh, that's it, but then it's still, you still need those eureka moments 3 months into the project or a year into it or whatever. You still need, yeah. So it's extra, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you to everybody who joined us and who listened in, watched the video, and added questions to the chat. We're coming up at the hour, so we will wrap up. But my sincere thanks to Mickle for joining us for another one of these talks.
My pleasure.
And to the cast. This is one that I wish. Jovan, you said this earlier. It's great to watch the video, but to have been in the room, was certainly something special. And this is one that I wish we had our little theater time machine to go back and be in the room together and perform and watch again.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Well, we love Mickle, and we love your work, and we will hopefully continue.
I love you guys.
Looking forward to Pinocchio.
There's some plays we haven't even gotten to yet that you've written.
Yes.
So I'm excited.
I'm looking forward to it already. Hell yeah. And Rob, always, you are the hostess with the mostest, man. No doubt.
Hey, thank you, Jovan.
No doubt.
Yeah, now that I've been complimented, we can call it a day. And yeah, just take care, everybody. And we'll figure out what the next one of these is and what it'll look like and when it'll be. So yeah, thanks, and have a great Thursday night.
All right. Bye-bye, kids.
Bye.
Good lengthy post.